I thought it was a ghost until it wagged its tail. That's the first thing I said to the school board when they asked me to explain what happened that morning. And to this day, I still don't know how else to put it. The hallway was empty. The sun had barely risen, and out of nowhere there he was, standing by the trophy case like he'd always belonged there. I'd come in early, as usual. Being the janitor of a public school means you've got to beat the sunrise if you want a head start on the mess left behind from the day before. Old sandwich crusts, forgotten notebooks, gum on the underside of desks, you name it. But that morning, it wasn't the stale cafeteria smell or the whir of the floor buffer that greeted me. It was a scruffy, shaggy dog with a streak of white fur down his side and eyes that looked too tired for his age. He didn't bark. He didn't flinch when I dropped my keys in surprise. He just sat there, looking at me, like he'd been waiting. "Where'd you come from, fella?" I asked, crouching down. He tilted his head like he understood the question. I glanced around, half expecting a kid or teacher to pop out and explain the prank, but no one came. It was just me and the dog, in the quiet. I stood up slowly and walked over to the front doors, still locked. No windows were open. I checked every door on the way in. Nothing made sense. I even looked for wet paw prints, thinking maybe he'd just slipped in before I arrived. Nothing. He followed me while I cleaned. Not too close, but not far behind either. When I emptied the trash in the front office, he sat by the attendance window. When I wiped down the science lab counters, he waited at the doorway. He didn't make a sound, didn't beg, didn't whine, just watched. "You waiting for someone?" I asked again, halfway through mopping the gym floor. He lay down, paws crossed, eyes never leaving me. Something about him was familiar, but I couldn't place it. When the bell rang at 8, chaos filled the building, sneakers squeaking on tile, lockers slamming, voices echoing through every hallway. I figured that would be his cue to bolt, but he didn't move. Instead, he trotted into Mrs. Delaney's third-grade class like he had a hall pass. That's when things got strange. He didn't just walk in and sit. He went straight to the back corner where a little boy named Billy Jackson sat. Billy was one of those quiet kids. Smart, but shy. Liked to keep to himself. He'd transferred in 2 months ago and hadn't said much since. The dog sat beside him, rested his chin on Billy's knee, and closed his eyes. Mrs. Delaney told me later that Billy didn't move for a full minute. Then, slowly, he placed his hand on the dog's head. And for the first time since he'd arrived at our school, Billy smiled. Word spread fast. By lunchtime, every student in that building knew about the mystery dog. Some said he came from the woods behind the football field. Others claimed he was a therapy dog sent from the district. A few insisted he was a ghost dog, back to watch over the school. But Principal Hammond had a different reaction. I'll never forget the look on his face when he saw the dog curled up in the reading nook during recess. His lips parted, but no words came out. He just stared, like someone had sucker-punched the air out of him. I watched his hands tremble. "That can't be," he whispered. I walked over. "You all right, sir?" He nodded slowly, then crouched beside the dog. The dog looked up and licked his hand. The principal choked out a breath and turned away. "His name was Cooper," he said finally. "My son's dog. He went missing after the accident. That was almost a year ago." I didn't know what to say. I knew about the accident, of course. Everyone did. Principal Hammond's son, Luke, had passed away last spring. Hit and run. Tragic. The whole town showed up to the funeral. But I'd never heard about a dog. He used to wait by the door every day for Luke to come home, the principal continued. After the funeral, he just vanished. We searched everywhere. Flyers, radio, even a reward. Nothing. We watched as Cooper laid his head down again, now resting in Billy's lap. Billy, who hadn't said more than 5 words to anyone since enrolling. "You think it's really him?" I asked. "I know it is," the principal said. From that day on, Cooper became part of the school. No one questioned it. He had a routine. He'd walk the halls in the morning with me, check in on classrooms, nap during reading time, and sit by the cafeteria entrance during lunch. Kids saved bits of carrots and crusts of bread just for him. He never begged, he never barked. He just watched, listened, and somehow always knew which child needed him most. One week, he spent every afternoon in the art room with a 5th grader who'd just lost her grandfather. The next, he started waiting outside the nurse's office until a student with frequent panic attacks started smiling again. Every Friday, like clockwork, he sat on the front steps at 3 p.m., staring down the road. No one ever came, but he sat there anyway. Principal Hammond started joining him, just the 2 of them, side by side watching cars go by. We never found out how Cooper got into the school that day. Cameras showed nothing. Doors were all accounted for. It was like he just appeared, but no one asked anymore. We didn't need to. The school board let him stay. Technically, he wasn't allowed. But technically, he didn't break any rules either. He didn't belong to anyone. He didn't cause problems. He just helped. Billy started talking again. Not all at once, but little by little. And every time he spoke, Cooper wagged his tail. I started bringing in an extra sandwich in the mornings, ham and cheese, cut in half. I ate one. Cooper got the other. That spring, the students held a fundraiser to build a little shelter for him outside the main entrance, with a plaque. It read, "For the friend who found us when we needed him most." But that was just the beginning, because the real miracle hadn't happened yet. And when it did, even I couldn't mop away the tears from the floor. If you had told me that a dog with no collar, no leash, and no known owner would become the center of a public school's entire heartbeat, I'd have said you were watching too many feel-good movies. But Cooper had a way of making even the most skeptical among us believe we were living inside one. The Monday after the kids finished building his shelter, he started doing something new. Right after morning announcements, Cooper would sit at the front of the hallway near the office, ears perked, waiting. And then, as the second bell rang, he'd walk into a random classroom. Never the same one twice in a row. It was like he was picking his spot for the day. One day it was 2nd grade, sitting beside a boy who had trouble with his reading fluency. Another, he laid beside a 6th grader who kept failing math tests. Somehow, the kids always improved when Cooper was there. Mrs. Delaney told me she saw a student read aloud for the first time all year just because Cooper rested his paw on the open page. The teachers started to plan their lessons with Cooper in mind. Some pulled beanbags into reading corners so he'd be comfortable if he stopped by. Others kept water bowls near their doors just in case. A couple of teachers even said they felt better teaching when he was in the room. Less pressure. More calm. I don't know how the district didn't catch wind of it sooner. Maybe they did, and someone higher up decided not to stir the pot. Either way, we weren't hiding him, but we weren't advertising him either. Cooper was just part of the school now, like the old oak tree in the back playground or the mural near the cafeteria. Principal Hammond changed the most. He used to be the kind of man who walked fast and talked faster. Always had a clipboard in his hand, always checking schedules, enrollment numbers, and fire drill reports. But lately, he was smiling more. Laughing. He started joining recess duty just to toss a ball with Cooper and the kids. And every Friday, without fail, they sat together on those front steps. sometimes not saying anything, sometimes talking about Luke. I once asked him why he did it. "Because he's waiting for someone," Hammond said, eyes never leaving the road. "And I figure if he's got the courage to wait, I can at least keep him company." That winter, flu season hit hard. A lot of students were out sick. Teachers, too. The halls felt quieter. Less laughter. Less energy. Cooper seemed to notice. He moved slower. Slept more. He'd still make his rounds, but sometimes he'd stop halfway through and just lie down in the hallway. Billy noticed, too. One morning, he knelt down beside Cooper and gently wrapped his scarf around the dog's neck. "He looks cold," Billy said. It was the first time I'd heard him speak outside of class. Cooper leaned into him like he understood. That afternoon, every kid in school showed up with something: an old blanket, a dog toy, a can of food. One girl even brought in her baby brother's winter hat and insisted Cooper wear it. He did. He looked ridiculous. The kids loved it. The cold didn't last long. By March, the flowers around Cooper's little shelter started blooming again. He perked up, too. Started doing laps around the playground, chasing balls and stealing lunch from unattended backpacks. That's when he did something none of us expected. He walked into the main office during fourth period, grabbed a pen off the counter, and carried it into the conference room where the PTA meeting was happening. Just strolled in like he had a complaint to file. Everyone burst out laughing. The president of the PTA stood up, took the pen, and jokingly said, "We'll make sure your opinion is noted, Cooper." I swear he wagged his tail like he understood every word. But it wasn't always sunshine and laughter. That spring, a boy named Trevor got into a fight. He'd been having a hard time. Parents divorcing, grades slipping. He punched a locker, yelled at a teacher, and stormed out of class. He ended up sitting behind the bleachers outside. Most of us didn't even know he was gone. But Cooper did. He left his classroom in the middle of the lesson and trotted outside. When we realized he was gone, a group of kids started looking for him. They found Cooper lying beside Trevor, his head resting on the boy's knee. Trevor was crying. No one said anything. They just let them sit there. Later, Trevor came back inside and apologized to everyone. His parents said it was the first time he'd opened up about anything in weeks. Word started to spread outside our school. Parents told friends. Friends told co-workers. One weekend, a family from 3 towns over showed up during Saturday soccer practice just to see Cooper. They brought their son, who had anxiety and hadn't gone to school in months. Cooper sat beside the boy. Didn't do anything special. Just sat. The boy smiled. Eventually, Principal Hammond made a decision. He called a special assembly. Every student filed into the gym, buzzing with curiosity. When Cooper walked in wearing a child-sized school t-shirt with "Mascot in Training" written on the back, the entire place erupted. "Today, we officially recognize Cooper as part of our school family," Hammond said, his voice catching halfway through the sentence. "He may not speak our language, but he's taught us more than most books ever will." They gave him a certificate. A real one, signed by every teacher and student. We hung it in the office beside the photos of past principals. I asked Hammond afterward if it was a good idea. I worried about what the district might say. He just smiled. "If they want to fire me for honoring a dog who's done more good than half the school board combined, I'll pack my office tonight." Turns out they didn't. We started getting letters, dozens, then hundreds. Parents, teachers, people from other states. They'd heard about Cooper. They wanted to visit. Some asked if he could visit their schools. Others just wanted to say thank you. One letter came from a retired vet in Michigan who had lost his dog and hadn't spoken to anyone in months. After watching a video of Cooper online, He adopted a new puppy. Said it changed his life. Cooper didn't know any of this. He just kept doing what he always did. Showed up. Sat by whoever needed him. Waited at the door when the bell rang. But something was changing. Not in him, in us. The school felt different now. Lighter. Kinder. Teachers were more patient. Students were more empathetic. Fewer kids got sent to the office. More kids asked if they could volunteer in the library or help clean up the playground. We were becoming better because of a stray dog who never barked, never asked for anything, and never left when things got hard. And somehow, deep down, I think we all started to believe Cooper came to us for a reason. Not because he was lost, but because we were. He reminded us of something important, that sometimes love doesn't need words. Sometimes presence is enough, and sometimes the gentlest souls find their way into our lives when we need them most. But what none of us knew yet was that Cooper had one more job to do, something even bigger than all the rest, and it was already in motion. The first time Cooper wandered off school grounds during class hours, we panicked. He had never done that before. For over 6 months, he had been as predictable as the morning bell, never straying more than a few feet from the schoolyard or the classrooms. But that morning, somewhere between second period and recess, he vanished. It started with a couple of second graders noticing he wasn't in his usual spot near the reading corner. Then a fourth grader said they saw him trot through the front doors. The security cameras were no help, same as the day he first arrived. He just seemed to slip between frames, like he was never there to begin with. But this time, there was no mystery about what we had to do. We searched. I ran around the perimeter of the school, checking the parking lot, the sidewalk that led to the main road, even the wooded patch near the back fence. Nothing. Principal Hammond drove around the block, and 3 teachers took their lunch breaks early to canvass the neighborhood. Kids kept asking where he was. Some even cried. An hour later, we found him. He was in the field across from the school, lying down beside a stranger sitting in the grass. A man, maybe in his 60s, hunched over with his arms hugging his knees and a blank look in his eyes. His coat was thin. His hands were shaking. Cooper had placed himself right up against the man's side. We approached slowly. It was clear the man was having some sort of breakdown, or had been lost for a while. "Sir," I said, stepping forward gently. "Do you need help?" He didn't answer right away. He just kept petting Cooper's head, like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Finally, he looked up. I didn't know where else to go. I saw the dog and followed. He just sat down with me." We later learned his name was Ray. He was a retired mechanic, lived 2 towns over, and had recently lost his wife. They'd been married for 40 years. After she passed, he'd begun walking for hours just to fill the time. That morning, he'd gotten on a bus with no destination, ridden until the end of the line, and gotten off in our neighborhood. He hadn't meant to come to our school, but Cooper had. Principal Hammond spoke with him while the nurse brought out a blanket and a cup of water. One of the teachers called a crisis line. Another contacted his daughter. Cooper stayed beside him through it all, not moving an inch. When Ray left with his daughter that afternoon, he hugged Cooper and whispered something into his ear. Cooper nuzzled his chest in return. The next day, Cooper was back in his usual spot by the front office, wagging his tail like nothing had happened. But everyone who saw him that morning greeted him a little differently, not just with affection, with reverence. Spring turned into summer, and with it came preparations for the end-of-year showcase. The school held it every May, a day for kids to show off art, science projects, and perform little plays in the auditorium. This year, it was different. The students had insisted Cooper be part of the show. They wrote a short play called The Dog Who Listened. It featured a cast of 15, each one telling a story of a student Cooper had helped. They used puppets for the roles, but at the end, the real Cooper was brought on stage, and the entire crowd stood up in applause. Cooper sat right in the center, wagged his tail once, then yawned. It was perfect. We framed a copy of the play's program and placed it on the wall beside his certificate. Over the summer, when the school shut down, Cooper didn't disappear like we worried he might. Instead, he visited different homes. No one knew how he chose, but each week he showed up in someone's yard, sometimes just sitting by the front steps until someone opened the door. Billy's house was the first, then mine. Then a family with 3 foster kids who had just moved into the neighborhood. Each time, the kids who lived there would shout to their friends, and a crowd would gather. Cooper would lay in the grass while they played tag or ran through sprinklers. He never went inside, never ate anything unless it was offered, but he always stayed until sunset, then trotted off. It was like he had his own calendar. When school resumed in August, he was already sitting outside on the front steps when the buses rolled in, tail thumping, tongue out, ready. That year, something shifted. The town itself started changing. A retired teacher who had stopped coming to school events due to arthritis returned just to see Cooper. She started volunteering in the library twice a week. The local bakery started donating bread and dog-safe treats to the school every Friday morning, with little notes tucked into each package. "Thank you for all you do, Cooper." A group of high school students from across town started a service project centered around animal welfare, and they cited Cooper's story as their inspiration. And somehow, all of this felt normal. Like Cooper had always been part of this town, this school, this beat-up but beautiful corner of the world. One day in late September, I was sitting on the bench near Cooper's shelter, finishing the last of my sandwich. He was beside me, paws crossed, eyes scanning the field where the kids were playing kickball. "You know you changed us, right?" I said, not expecting a response. "You're not just a dog. You're a reminder." Cooper glanced at me, then back at the field. I could have sworn he was smiling. Just then, a soccer ball bounced our way, followed by 2 breathless second graders chasing it. "Can he play with us?" one asked. "Only if you can keep up," I said. Cooper didn't wait for my answer. He bolted after the ball, tail wagging like a banner, the kids laughing behind him. The bell rang minutes later, and Cooper trotted back, proudly carrying the ball in his mouth. Another Monday. Another day made better. And none of us had any idea what was coming next. Because the heart of the town, the very heart, was about to stop beating. And Cooper, once again, would be there. I remember the exact moment the phone rang in the front office. It was a Tuesday, just after lunch, and the building still had that lingering smell of chicken nuggets and apple slices. Mrs. Cormack, the school secretary, answered like she always did. Cheerful, polite, professional. But I saw her face change almost instantly. Her eyes went wide, her lips parted, and her shoulders stiffened. I was buffing the floors near the nurse's station when she called out to me. "Harold, you better come here. Now!" I dropped the buffer and hurried over. She held out the phone, her hand trembling. "It's the hospital. It's Principal Hammond." My stomach sank. I took the phone and listened to the nurse on the other end. Hammond had collapsed in the grocery store parking lot just 30 minutes earlier. A passerby had called for help. He was unconscious when they arrived. They were running tests. They didn't know yet what had happened. All they knew was that he hadn't woken up. The call ended, and silence swallowed the office. Mrs. Cormack sat back in her chair, covering her mouth with her hand. I looked out through the glass doors. Cooper was sitting there, facing the flagpole. Not 5 minutes later, he stood up, walked across the front lawn, and headed straight toward the gate. We'd never seen him leave during the day, not since the time with Ray. A few of the 5th graders saw him go and tried to follow, but he picked up speed. Not running. Just purposeful. No one stopped him. By the time I got to the parking lot, he was gone. We waited. The teachers kept calm, though I could tell their minds weren't on lesson plans anymore. The kids picked up on the tension. Whispers passed through the hallways like drifting leaves. At 3:12 p.m., Mrs. Cormack's phone rang again. She picked up, then looked at me, her voice cracking. "He's stable. They say it was a minor stroke. He's awake, confused but talking." We both exhaled at the same time. I don't think either of us realized we'd been holding our breath. We told the staff, then the students. There were sighs of relief, some tears, even a few spontaneous cheers. But one question remained. Where was Cooper? That night, none of us saw him. He didn't show up at the school, not in anyone's yard, not even at his shelter. The next morning, just after sunrise, I pulled into the parking lot and saw him sitting beside the flagpole. Dirty, wet, tail thumping. He looked tired. I walked up slowly and knelt beside him. "You went to see him, didn't you?" He licked my hand. Later, when Hammond returned to work, 2 weeks after the stroke, he confirmed it. Swore up and down that Cooper had been there. Said he woke up in the hospital room, barely able to move his arms, and there was Cooper lying under the bed. No one else saw him. No nurse, no doctor, not even his wife who visited later that night. But Hammond was certain. "I could feel his head against my foot," he said. "It kept me from panicking, like someone was telling me I wasn't done yet." After that, things changed again. Not drastically, subtly. The teachers seemed more protective, the kids more gentle. Even I found myself stopping more often in the hallway to watch Cooper nap in the sunbeam near the trophy case. We all felt it, though no one said it out loud. This wasn't forever. Somehow, in the deepest part of us, we knew we were being given something rare. Borrowed time. Still, Cooper carried on. He resumed his routines. Sat in on spelling tests. Led kindergartners to their cubbies. Chased soccer balls at recess. But now there was a kind of grace to it. Like every movement mattered a little more. One crisp October morning, we had visitors, reporters from a local magazine. They'd heard the story through a parent and wanted to feature the school. At first, we hesitated. It felt like shining a spotlight on something that should remain quiet, sacred. But Hammond approved it. "Maybe this story helps other schools remember what really matters," he said. The article was published a week later. It was called "The Dog Who Runs the School." Photos, interviews, even quotes from kids who said things like, "Cooper helps me be brave," and "He's the reason I like coming to school." The day after the story went online, our mailbox was full. Cards, drawings, letters, even care packages addressed to Cooper. One envelope had no return address. Inside was a single photo of a dog that looked just like Cooper, sitting beside an elderly man in a wheelchair. On the back of the photo, in shaky handwriting, it read, "He came to my husband before he passed. Thank you." We showed it to Principal Hammond. He stared at it for a long time. "Maybe he's not ours," he said quietly. "Maybe he never was." But that didn't mean we loved him any less. That winter, a heavy snowstorm hit town. School was canceled for 3 days. Roads closed. Trees snapped under the weight of ice. I stayed at the school each night, sleeping in my little maintenance office to make sure pipes didn't freeze. I kept the heat on in Cooper's shelter, shoveled paths for him to walk, laid down extra blankets. He never left my side. Each night, after checking the boilers and clearing the drains, I'd sit with him by the cafeteria windows. We watched the snow fall in silence. I told him stories about my own childhood, about the dog I had growing up, about my dad, about mistakes I'd made and people I missed. He listened, his eyes never leaving mine. When the school reopened, the kids cheered when they saw him like he was a long-lost friend who'd come home. They took turns brushing his coat and cleaning his water bowl. One group even knit him a new scarf. Things went back to normal, if anything involving Cooper could be called that. But then came the day the new superintendent visited. We knew she was coming for weeks. There'd been whispers about reform, tighter budgets, increased performance standards. Everyone was on edge. When she arrived, she wore a sharp suit and carried a clipboard, smiled tightly, introduced herself to the staff, nodded politely to the students. Then she saw Cooper. He was lying in the hallway, half asleep, tail flicking. She stopped, eyed him, tapped her pen against her clipboard. "Is that school property?" she asked. "No, ma'am," Hammond replied. "That's Cooper. He's part of the school." She raised an eyebrow. "Is he certified as a therapy dog?" "No." "Is he owned by any staff member or registered with the district?" "No." "Then why is he here?" Before Hammond could answer, a small voice spoke up. "Because he helps us." We turned. It was Billy, now taller, more confident, holding a book under one arm and his chin high. "He helps all of us," Billy said, "and he's not going anywhere." The hallway fell silent. The superintendent looked at Billy, then at Hammond. Then she looked at Cooper, who was now sitting upright, alert but calm, as if daring her to say more. She closed her clipboard. "Well," she said, "I suppose there are worse things to have in a school." She left an hour later, never mentioned Cooper again. We didn't either. We didn't have to. That spring, the PTA voted to officially name the school library after Cooper. A small bronze plaque was installed above the door. "The Cooper Room," it read. "For the friend who taught us how to listen." He still came to the library every morning, curling up in the back corner on the old beanbag chair. Kids brought him books to read to. Sometimes they just sat beside him in silence. It was enough. Always. Somehow, it was enough. But we could all feel something shifting again, like a song beginning to play its final notes. Not loud, not sad, just honest. And we weren't ready. Not yet, because what happened next would test everything Cooper had taught us about courage, about kindness, and about the power of simply being there. It started with a cough. A single, soft, almost apologetic cough that came from Cooper one Thursday morning as he lay beside the kindergarten cubbies. At first, no one paid much attention. Dogs sneeze, dogs snore, dogs make all kinds of strange noises. But this wasn't a sneeze. It wasn't snoring. It happened again and then again, soft but persistent, the way an old engine sputters before a long haul. I noticed first, since I was sweeping the hallway near his usual resting spot. He gave me a look when he coughed again, not scared, just tired. I knelt beside him and scratched behind his ears. "You okay, buddy?" He thumped his tail, but didn't lift his head. Later that day, during lunch, he didn't get up to greet the students. That was when the teachers started whispering. "Has he moved much today?" He didn't even touch the leftover carrots. He wouldn't chase the foam ball at recess, just watched. By the end of the week, he was moving slower, still showing up in classrooms, still resting his chin on knees and curling beside reading corners. But there was a heaviness to his steps, a kind of gravity in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Principal Hammond called me into his office Monday morning. "I think we need to get him checked out," he said quietly. "I know he's not mine, or yours, or anyone's, technically, but someone's got to take responsibility." I nodded. "I'll take him." We called around, and a local vet agreed to see him that afternoon. One of the third graders, a girl named Ellie, drew a picture of Cooper with a big red heart on his chest and taped it to his shelter before we left. Cooper didn't resist when I opened the truck door. Just climbed in, settled into the passenger seat, and stared out the window. At the clinic, they took him gently, ran tests, listened to his chest, took blood. Cooper stayed calm through all of it. The vet, a tall man named Dr. Connors, called me into the back room afterward. He didn't sugarcoat it. "He's old," he said. "Older than we thought. Probably older than he should have been able to manage on his own. He's got a heart murmur, some fluid in his lungs. It's not contagious and it's not urgent, but it's serious. He'll need rest, maybe medication, definitely less walking." I swallowed hard. "Can he still be at the school?" Dr. Connors paused. "He can, but only if it's a calm environment. If he gets too tired, if he shows signs of struggling, you'll need to let me know." We rode back in silence. Cooper's head rested on my thigh the whole drive. That night, we put a mattress in the maintenance room, just for him. I slept on a cot beside him. We didn't speak, not that we could, but the silence was comforting. The next day, we broke the news to the kids. Principal Hammond stood in front of the cafeteria and said, "Our friend Cooper needs some time to rest. He's going to be staying indoors more. Maybe he won't be in every classroom, but he's still with us. He's just slowing down a bit, like we all do sometimes." There were tears, of course, kids who wanted to hug him, teachers who needed a moment before facing their next class. But Cooper, as always, seemed to know how to soften the blow. He licked cheeks, wagged his tail, sat still as stone while dozens of little hands reached out to pet him. And true to his nature, he adjusted. He stopped doing his morning rounds but kept showing up in the library. He didn't chase soccer balls, but watched from the shade near the bench. He ate slower, slept more. The PTA organized a volunteer schedule. Each grade took turns helping with his care, bringing in blankets, fluffing his bed, reading to him during rest periods. It became part of the school rhythm, like pledges and announcements and lunch count. In December, Billy gave Cooper a gift, a locket. Inside it was a tiny photo, the one taken the day Cooper sat beside him during his first reading lesson. In it, Billy looked so small, so lost. Now he was standing taller, smiling more. "So he never forgets us," Billy said. We attached it to Cooper's collar. Winter settled in. Snow came again. The school became a warm bubble of routine and care. Each time Cooper coughed, someone was there with a blanket or a gentle hand. But even love can't stop time. One icy January morning, Cooper didn't get up when the bell rang. He was lying in his shelter, eyes open, tail still, just watching the falling snow. I knelt beside him. "You okay, boy?" He looked at me. Just looked. I knew. He wasn't in pain. Not yet. But he was tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. Principal Hammond and I met in his office that afternoon. "We need to be ready," he said. "But we're not telling the kids yet, not until we have to." I agreed. But I also knew Cooper wouldn't want anything hidden. That was never his way. So we began planning, just in case. A memory wall, a book of letters, a quiet space in the library where students could write down what he meant to them, We never used the word goodbye, not yet, because Cooper was still there, every day, watching, listening, helping. And while he was still breathing, we believed he had more to do. We just didn't know what, not yet. The weather warmed up quicker than anyone expected. By mid-February, the frost had begun retreating from the grass behind the playground, and patches of green peeked through like shy smiles. Kids ran a little faster again. The air smelled like earth and wood chips. And Cooper, despite everything the vet had warned us about, seemed to perk up just enough to make us question whether maybe, just maybe, he had a few more springs left in him. He still coughed in the mornings, still needed help climbing the 2 steps up to his shelter. But he was eating more. Lifting his head higher, even wagging his tail with something close to his old rhythm. I remember walking past the music room and seeing him lying there, eyes closed, while a group of 3rd graders sang a folk song they were learning for assembly. One of them, a boy named Matthew, sat beside him strumming a toy guitar. Cooper thumped his tail twice. That was his way of applauding. It became our unspoken routine to look for those little signs. 2 tail thumps meant joy. 1 meant acknowledgement. No tail meant tired, but still present. It sounds silly maybe, but it was enough. Enough to measure how much of him we still had, day by day. One afternoon, Billy came up to me near the lunch line. "Do dogs know when we're worried?" he asked. "I think the good ones do," I said. Billy nodded thoughtfully. "Then Cooper probably knows everything." That week, Miss Ramsey's class started a project called The Cooper Chronicles. Every student wrote 1 page about a time Cooper helped them. They stapled the pages together into a giant book, hand-drawn cover and all. They added photos, too. Cooper in silly hats, Cooper under the parachute in gym class, Cooper asleep during spelling tests. When they gave it to Principal Hammond, he had to step out of the assembly early, said something about a call he forgot to make. But everyone saw him wipe his eyes. The next day, Cooper didn't move much. He came to the building, made it to the library, but lay on the same beanbag for hours. When a student tried to coax him out with a squeaky toy, he blinked slowly and stayed where he was. Dr. Connors came again, listened to his breathing, felt along his ribs, said the medication was helping, but only just. It wasn't enough anymore. The best thing we could do now was keep him comfortable, keep him warm, keep him loved. We told the students gently. No one used the word sick. We just said Cooper needed rest, needed quiet. And just like that, the school became quieter. Kids tiptoed in the halls. Recess turned from tag to drawing circles in the dirt with sticks. Even the older kids, who usually grumbled about everything, walked past Cooper's spot and gave him a soft smile or whisper. Then came the letter. It arrived in an envelope with no return address, handwritten in block letters. Inside was a check, $1,000, made out to the school, with a sticky note that said, "For Cooper's comfort, no strings attached." We used the money to build a second shelter. This one had thicker insulation, a softer base, and was placed near the front of the school so Cooper could watch everyone arrive in the morning. Students took turns decorating it with paper stars and heart cutouts. On the first day it opened, Cooper walked over by himself, lay down inside, closed his eyes. 3 tail thumps. It became known as Cooper's porch. He started choosing a student to sit with him each morning. No one understood how he picked, but somehow it was always the kid who needed it most. A boy who'd just moved from another state. A girl who lost her grandmother. A child who failed a spelling test and couldn't lift his head. They'd sit with him for 5 minutes, then go to class, always calmer, always taller somehow. One rainy afternoon, the fire alarm went off. False trigger. Some steam from the science lab set it off. Kids filed out to the lot, grumbling and shivering. Amid the noise and confusion, someone noticed Cooper wasn't outside. Panic rippled. Teachers started calling out. Some students cried. I ran back in with Hammond and found him under the library table, sleeping through the whole thing. We brought him out in a blanket. The kids erupted in cheers. Some clapped. Some ran to hug him. He blinked at us, unbothered, then thumped his tail twice. That's when we noticed something. His locket was gone. The photo. The one Billy had given him. We searched for it for an hour. Scoured every hall, checked under every bench, every trash bin. Nothing. Billy was quiet when we told him. He just nodded and walked to the library. The next day, he returned with a new one. This time, it held 2 pictures, one of the original and one of the whole class lined up behind Cooper outside Cooper's porch. He clipped it to Cooper's collar without a word. Cooper leaned his head against Billy's side. No tail thump. Just stillness. Spring began to bloom around us. Trees budding. Daffodils pushing through mulch. Morning light shining earlier and longer each day. And though we knew better, though we knew time was not ours to control, a part of all of us began to hope. Hope that maybe he'd make it to the end of the school year. Hope that he'd watch one more art show, one more field day, one more student lose a tooth and flash a gap-toothed smile in triumph. Cooper never made promises, but he gave us moments, and we held on to them one by one. Then one morning, a group of students came into school with something new. Pins. Little round buttons they'd made at home. Each one had a paw print and the words, "Walk like Cooper." They handed them out during recess. Teachers wore them. Parents started asking for them. Walk like Cooper became more than a phrase. It became a way to move through the world, quietly, kindly, with purpose. And through it all, Cooper kept going. Slower, yes, but going. The kids kept watch. The staff held their breath. And Cooper, faithful as the sunrise, met each day the only way he knew how. Present, peaceful, and always ready to sit beside the one who needed him most. No one said it out loud, but we all knew we were counting. Days, tail wags, minutes he spent awake. Whether he stood on his own in the morning or waited to be helped from his shelter. Whether he ate all of his breakfast or just sniffed it and looked up with those soft, amber eyes. It wasn't dread, exactly. It was reverence. We were measuring time like you do with sunsets, knowing it's beautiful, knowing it's fleeting, and still grateful for every second. March brought field trips, spring concerts, and more light through the library windows. Cooper still came in each day, still lay on his beanbag in the reading corner. But he didn't get up as much anymore. He watched the world more than he moved through it. Billy started coming early, arriving before most of the teachers. He'd sit beside Cooper and read aloud, sometimes books, sometimes his own journal. I asked him once if he wanted company, but he shook his head gently. He doesn't need more noise, Billy said. Just stories. It became something sacred. Billy and Cooper in the soft morning light, the school quiet around them. No cameras, no speeches, just a boy and a dog sharing silence that said more than any words. One Wednesday, during art class, a group of students painted murals for the hallway. Most went with nature themes, flowers, birds, sunshine. But one group of 5th graders painted Cooper. Big as life, tongue out, eyes sparkling. They drew kids around him, hands reaching, smiling faces. When it was finished, we wheeled Cooper down to see it. He looked at it for a long time, then lifted his head and thumped his tail 3 times. That afternoon, I caught Principal Hammond standing in front of the mural by himself. He didn't say anything when I joined him, just nodded slowly. "This place was broken when he showed up," he murmured. "Not completely, but cracked. Staff tired, kids withdrawn. Me, I was barely standing. Then he walked in and changed all of us, without saying a word." "Do you think he knows what he's done?" I asked. "I think he knows more than we do," Hammond replied. That weekend, a local documentary filmmaker reached out. She'd read the article, seen the buttons, heard the stories. She asked if she could visit the school, talk to students, maybe capture Cooper's legacy. At first, Hammond hesitated. "He doesn't like flashbulbs," he said, "and this isn't a show." But the filmmaker, a soft-spoken woman named Charlotte, said she'd come alone. No crew, no lights, just her, a camera, and a promise to respect the story. She arrived on a Thursday, sat in the back of the library for 3 hours, just watching. Then she spoke to students one by one. Always quiet, always kind. She never even pointed the camera until the second day, and when she did, it was turned on a boy painting Cooper's name in bubble letters. "What does he mean to you?" she asked. "He means I'm not invisible," the boy said. The film was never meant to be big, just a 10-minute feature for local TV. But after it aired, it spread faster than any of us expected. Social media lit up. News outlets called. Donations poured in for the school library. Someone even sent a custom-built dog bed made of memory foam and cedar wood. Cooper never changed. He still lay in his spot, still wagged his tail when the preschoolers toddled by, still gave a gentle nod whenever someone sat beside him with a book. But one Monday, he didn't stand up at all. He opened his eyes when Billy arrived, licked his hand once, then laid his head back down. We called Dr. Connors, who came without hesitation. He examined Cooper quietly, his hands soft, his face grave. "His heart's slowing down," he said. "It's not painful, just quiet." We moved his bed to the reading room, surrounded him with pillows, blankets, soft light. Every student was allowed to visit in groups of 2. No tears, just time. They brought drawings, photos, poems. One class sang a lullaby in unison. Another gave him a paper crown that read, "King of Kindness." Still, he held on. Still, he listened. One afternoon, a storm rolled in. Thunder shook the windows. The power flickered. And Cooper, who'd once slept through fire alarms, lifted his head. Billy was beside him, whispering something. Cooper's ears twitched. Then he placed his paw gently over Billy's hand. It stayed there for 5 minutes. Afterward, Billy stood and looked at all of us. "He's not scared of storms," he said. "He's just saying thank you." The next day, Cooper thumped his tail twice when a new student walked in crying and sat beside him. The day after that, he ate a full breakfast. We began to believe again. Not in a miracle, just in time, a little more of it. One more week, one more morning. Principal Hammond ordered a plaque to be placed in front of Cooper's porch. It read, "He walked with us. Now we walk like him." No one wanted to talk about what would happen after. Not yet, because he was still here, still breathing, still listening. And that was enough. The day Cooper stood up on his own again, we all held our breath. It was early morning, barely past sunrise, and I was sweeping the front hallway when I looked up and saw him. He had lifted himself out of his bed by the reading corner and taken a single step forward, slow and stiff, but solid. He looked toward the front door, then toward the classrooms, and then back at the mural of himself on the wall. His legs wobbled, but he stayed up. Then, with that same careful grace he'd always had, he walked to his water bowl and took a long sip. Word spread in minutes. By second period, every student had heard about it. Teachers whispered the news to each other like they were passing along a secret recipe. He walked again. Did you see him? He made it all the way to the water bowl. For the rest of the day, Cooper stayed by the mural. The fifth graders took turns sitting beside him, each one quiet, each one reaching out to rest a hand on his back. He didn't move much, but he didn't need to. He was there. That was enough. It had been months since we stopped questioning how Cooper knew where to be. But that week, it became more obvious than ever. On Tuesday, he waited in the hallway outside Ms. Gordon's room. That morning, her mother had passed away. She hadn't told anyone yet. When she walked in, saw Cooper lying there, she knelt beside him and cried. He didn't move. Just looked at her and blinked slowly. Afterward, she said she hadn't cried since the hospital, that she didn't think she could until she saw him. The staff began calling it his knowing. Not a trick, not training, just knowing. On Thursday, a fourth-grade boy named Ethan had a panic attack during math. His breathing got shallow, his hands trembled. His teacher called the nurse, but before anyone arrived, Cooper had already walked into the room. He didn't go to the teacher or the aide. He went straight to Ethan and laid down beside him. Ethan wrapped both arms around his neck and buried his face in the dog's fur. He calmed down in seconds. When the nurse arrived, she just nodded and stepped back. Later, Ethan drew a picture of the moment. Cooper was drawn large and smiling, and the caption underneath read, "My best friend made the noise stop." The school created a Cooper board next to the main office. Students could write little notes and pin them to it. Messages, drawings, jokes, memories. Some of them read, "Thanks for letting me cry and not telling anyone. I didn't want to come to school until I knew you were still here. I failed my spelling test, but you sat next to me and I didn't feel like a failure anymore." There were hundreds by the end of the month. Spring rolled forward. With it came the class garden project, and this year they dedicated one of the garden beds to Cooper. The kindergarteners planted daisies, the first graders planted marigolds, and the older grades worked together on a winding little path of painted rocks with kind words on each one. Kind, loyal, brave, soft, gentle, here. The bed was named Cooper's Path. He visited it every morning after breakfast. Sometimes he lay beside it. Sometimes he just sat, staring at the flowers as if counting them. When he rested there, no one played loud games. Kids slowed down as they passed. Some crouched to lay pebbles or twigs shaped like hearts. In April, the town held its annual spring parade. For the first time ever, the elementary school entered a float. Not for science, not for sports. For Cooper. The float was shaped like his shelter, with hand-drawn images of him all around the outside. On top, a stuffed replica of Cooper made by the art teacher and half her class. It wore a little red scarf and a badge that said, "Kindness Captain." They invited Cooper to ride with the float in a little wagon lined with blankets. He did. He sat calmly while students walked beside the float holding signs that read, "Walk like Cooper," and "He sat with me." Parents cried. People clapped. Local reporters took pictures. But Cooper didn't react to the crowd. He looked at the students. Always, only them. Later that week, Hammond and I talked in the faculty lounge. "We keep preparing ourselves," he said, stirring his coffee. "Every time he slows down, we brace for goodbye. But maybe that's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Maybe it's about what we do after. How we carry him. How we walk." That Friday, Billy gave a short speech during morning assembly. It wasn't planned. He just stepped forward when they asked if anyone had an announcement. "We used to think Cooper was just a dog," he said. "But he's more like a feeling, like knowing someone's got your back, like a warm coat when you forgot it was cold outside. If he gets tired, it's okay. We'll take turns being like him. That way the school will always feel like this." Cooper was lying at the base of the stage. When Billy finished, Cooper lifted his head, looked right at him, and wagged his tail once. The auditorium was silent. Then, applause. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was soft. Kind. Like everything Cooper taught us. That afternoon, as the buses lined up, Cooper walked out to the front lawn by himself. He stood by the flagpole and looked at each bus as it pulled away. No tail wagging. Just watching. I stood nearby, hands in my pockets. "What are you doing, boy? Saying goodbye?" He blinked, turned, and walked back toward the building. We followed. We always followed, because Cooper had already shown us what kind of people we could be, and we weren't going to forget. The final stretch of the school year snuck in like the slow unfolding of a well-worn book's last chapter. Quiet, familiar, and heavier than we expected. Standardized tests began. Permission slips for the year-end picnic were passed out. Yearbooks were ordered, and field day t-shirts started showing up in the hallways. And through it all, Cooper remained our still point. Every morning, he was there. Sometimes on the bench near the flagpole, sometimes in the reading corner, sometimes beside the door to Ms. Delaney's class. He didn't move as often as he used to, and his naps grew longer. But he was there, eyes open, ears twitching, always watching. The students had grown used to measuring their days by him. They knew it was a good morning if Cooper was sitting up. A quiet day if he was curled beside the mural. A worried day if he hadn't moved by lunch. One Monday, when it had rained all weekend and everyone came in dragging their feet, Cooper surprised us. He walked the whole length of the hallway, slow and stiff but steady, and stopped at each classroom door. He didn't go in, just looked inside for a moment, like he was checking in, then moved on. By the time he reached the end of the hall, he was panting. I came over with his water bowl and laid it beside him. "You still making rounds, huh?" I said. He didn't look up, just drank, slow and grateful. That day, the whole school seemed to walk softer. A second-grade girl named Riley wrote a poem and taped it to his shelter. "You don't talk, but you say a lot, with eyes that see and steps that trot. You find the sad and make them smile. You walk a little, rest a while, and when I sit beside your fur, the world gets still, the noise gets blur." That poem was read aloud during the next assembly, and afterward, a group of students from different grades formed a lunchtime Cooper Club. Their job? Taking turns sitting with him, brushing his coat, and recording a daily log of his activities, where he sat, who he visited, how much he ate. The logbook was filled with entries like, "Sat by Ms. Grady's room for 10 minutes. Gave 3 tail thumps when Jonah read him a story. Didn't eat much today. Tried peanut butter. seemed to like it. Rested during recess, but lifted head when he heard the xylophone music from the music room. It was like the students had created a language through which they could process love, change, and memory. Cooper became their lesson in empathy. Ungraded, quiet, but deeply learned. In mid-May, a retired alum named Mr. Halverson came back to visit. He'd been the school principal 30 years ago. His wife had passed the year before, and he said he just wanted to see the school one more time. He used a cane and had trouble with stairs, but insisted on seeing everything. When he reached the library, Cooper was there, asleep as usual. Mr. Halverson knelt down, slowly, painfully, and placed his hand on Cooper's back. "There's something holy about this one," he whispered. Nobody laughed. Nobody needed to. After that visit, he wrote a letter to the local newspaper titled, "The Dog Who Knows the Weight of a Child's Heart." It went viral. Once again, mail started coming in. Postcards from other schools, letters from grandparents, art from students in other states. One envelope had no return address, just a single line written inside. "I wish I had a Cooper growing up." As the last month of school approached, the PTA began planning an event. They didn't call it a tribute or a farewell. They called it Cooper's Day. A day to celebrate the quiet joy he had brought. There'd be music, artwork, letters read aloud, and yes, plenty of peanut butter. We asked Billy to make the invitation design. He drew a picture of Cooper curled in a sunbeam with his tail wagging just once. The words underneath read, "A day for the friend who sat with us." When we showed it to Cooper, he sniffed it, blinked, and rested his paw on the edge. That was all we needed. That week, Cooper slowed again. He needed help standing. We laid more cushions, we wrapped him in blankets, we made sure someone was always nearby, but he never once stayed home. On the Friday before Cooper's Day, something unexpected happened. A former student, now in high school, walked through the front doors, holding an envelope. "I wanted to give this to him in person," he said. Inside the envelope was a photo of him as a scared kindergartner, crying on the first day of school, with Cooper beside him. He'd circled the dog in the picture and written, "This is the reason I came back the next day." Cooper sniffed the photo, then rested his head on the boy's foot. The boy stayed for an hour, and the next day, so did dozens of others. They came from everywhere. Former students, parents, people who had only heard the story through the newspaper or online. They brought snacks, drawings, folded notes with nothing but a paw print on them. Cooper lay in his wagon on a soft bed of blankets. He didn't move much, but he lifted his head for each visitor, watched their faces, gave the softest of tail thumps when someone knelt close enough to whisper. One student read a letter aloud. "Dear Cooper, I don't know what you are. I mean, I know you're a dog, but I think maybe you're also something else. A feeling, a kind of hug that doesn't need arms. I think you're the thing we didn't know we needed, but now we don't want to lose." By the time the sun dipped low, Cooper was asleep. But we didn't leave. We stayed. We sat on the lawn and told stories, laughed, remembered. Because Cooper's Day wasn't about endings. It was about presence. About how someone can change a place simply by showing up, quietly, again and again. And Cooper had always shown up. Always. The Monday after Cooper's Day felt different. The air was gentler somehow. Not just because of the breeze that fluttered through the open windows or the light scent of lavender from the PTA garden. It was something else. Something quiet and deep, like the hush of a church before a song. Students came in whispering, not out of sadness, but because the day before had meant something. Even the loudest kids, the ones who normally tossed backpacks and shouted greetings, walked softer that morning. There were no announcements, no music over the intercom, just a quiet hum of activity as the school settled into another week. Cooper was still there. He was in his usual spot, tucked into the blankets in his wagon just outside the library. Billy was beside him, reading. The door to the library was cracked open, and the morning sun hit Cooper's fur just right. He looked like a statue carved from light and memory. I walked by slowly, broom in hand. Billy looked up. "He's really tired today," he said softly. I nodded. "Yeah, but he's still with us." Billy put a hand on Cooper's paw. "He's always going to be with us, even if he's not breathing. I think that's how it works with souls like his." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just reached out and squeezed Billy's shoulder, then walked down the hall. At lunch, the principal called a quiet meeting with the faculty. We sat in the staff lounge, silent as he stood in front of us. "He might not make it through the week," Hammond said. His voice didn't crack. It was low and certain. Dr. Connors visited again this morning. Cooper's heartbeat is slow, his breathing shallow. "There's no pain," he said, "just fading." Some of the teachers cried. A few looked away. No one left the room. "We're not making an announcement," Hammond continued. "We're not turning this into something loud. We're going to let the kids come as they feel, say what they want to say, and we're going to give him peace. That's the least we owe him." That afternoon, the librarian read to him. A group of students brought their instruments and played soft lullabies. Billy came back after school and lay beside him for nearly an hour, eyes closed, hand still on that paw. And the next morning, Cooper was still breathing, but he didn't lift his head, didn't move. That day, we placed him in the center of the reading room. Students came by in twos and threes. Some brought their favorite books to read to him. Others just sat in silence. One kindergartner curled beside him and fell asleep. No one told him to move. On Thursday, it rained. Not the hard kind, but soft, steady. The kind that makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. We wheeled Cooper's wagon closer to the window so he could see the droplets racing down the glass. At one point, a small rainbow appeared above the library garden. He watched it. And then, that night, he passed. Billy found him first the next morning. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just placed a folded blanket over Cooper's back, then walked to the office and handed me the note. It was written in Billy's small, careful handwriting. He waited until the school was quiet. He wanted it to be peaceful. He wanted it to feel like a story ending just right. The staff was informed. The students were told gently, room by room. No alarms, no wails, just a shared hush that settled over every hallway, every desk, every breath. The school didn't close that day, but it felt like the world slowed down just for us. Hammond held a short assembly that afternoon, just the students and staff. No press, no cameras. He stood on stage, looking at us all, his hands clasped in front of him. Cooper didn't speak. He didn't run things. He didn't carry lesson plans or sign report cards, but he taught us more than any curriculum ever could. He taught us how to be present, how to listen, how to care without needing a reason. He paused, eyes scanning the room. He walked in without a sound and left us better than he found us. That's more than most of us can say. There was silence, then applause. Slow, steady, gentle, every hand moving in time with the memory of that tail thumping against the floor. We held a small burial in the school garden that weekend. The mayor came. Dr. Connors. Dozens of families, past and present. Even some students who had long since graduated. We laid him beneath the tree near Cooper's path, wrapped in the same blanket Billy had given him. A brass plaque was placed at the base. In this place, a good friend lay. He listened. He loved. He stayed. Flowers lined the stone walkway. Painted pebbles, tiny drawings, and notes were tucked into the soil. No one wanted to leave. But eventually, the sun set. And still, no one truly left. Because he didn't. The next week, students resumed their routines. Classes resumed. Laughter returned slowly, like music in a room after the power flickers back. But nothing was the same. And that was okay, because the kids still walked like him. They paused in the hallway for a friend who dropped their papers. They sat beside the loner at lunch. They noticed things they never noticed before. They listened more than they spoke. Billy started a club called The Quiet Kind. No rules, no badges, just kids who agreed to be more like Cooper. The mural was updated, now with a halo of sunlight behind his image and soft flowers under his feet. I still walk past it every morning. Sometimes I hear a tail thump in my head. Sometimes I stop and whisper, "We're still walking, buddy." And we are. Every day. We walk like Cooper. Because love like his never leaves. It just moves into our steps, our voices, our small acts of kindness. It becomes part of the way we live. He changed our school. He changed us. And we will never forget.